Serafina had always believed that the universe did not make mistakes. She grew up hearing this from her grandmother, a small and quiet woman who kept a garden full of healing herbs and spoke about the moon goddess the way other people spoke about the weather, as something real, something present, something that affected every living thing, whether they believed in it or not. Her grandmother would say, while grinding dried lavender between her palms, that every wolf was given a path, and that the path was never random. It was always chosen with care. Serafina believed this. She believed it deeply, the way young people believe things, before the world tests them. She was 22 years old when the world tested her. She had gone to the Moon Covenant ceremony the way everyone in Silver Hollow Pack went, dressed carefully, standing in the crowd, feeling the pull of the full moon above like a hand pressed gently on the top of her head. The Alpha King was visiting that year, Kael Draven. Everyone knew the name. It was the kind of name that arrived in a room before the person did. When he walked in, the crowd went quiet without being asked. He was tall and still, in the way that powerful people sometimes are, like they have learned that they do not need to take up space, because the space simply arranges itself around them. He had dark eyes and a calm expression that gave nothing away, and he moved through the ceremony like a man who had attended 1,000 of them and would attend 1,000 more. Serafina was not looking for anything that night. She was not hoping. She was simply standing in the crowd, watching, the way everyone else was. And then his eyes found hers. It happened the way her grandmother had described it, like a door opening in the middle of your chest that you did not know was there. A warmth, a recognition, something inside her that said, quietly and with great certainty, there. She stood very still. He looked at her for a long moment, and she could see it, even from that distance. Even across a crowded room, she could see that he felt it too. His expression changed in a way that was almost invisible, the way a calm surface of water shifts just before something moves underneath it. And then he looked away. He left the ceremony without speaking to her. 3 days later, a letter arrived at her uncle's house. It bore the royal seal. She was not supposed to see it, but she heard her uncle reading it aloud to his wife, behind a closed door, in a voice that kept going quiet and then starting again. The words came through the wall in pieces, but enough pieces that she understood the whole picture. The Alpha King had formally rejected the mate bond. He had chosen someone else, a woman from the Blood Moon Court, a politically important alliance. The pack was to ask no questions. Serafina stood in the hallway and listened and felt the thing her grandmother had never warned her about, the specific sensation of something spiritual being pulled out of you without your permission. Her wolf made a sound inside her that had no name. It was not quite pain, and it was not quite grief. It was something older than both. She went outside. She walked to the river behind the pack house. She sat there until the moon rose high and cold above the trees. And then, very quietly, she allowed herself to fall apart. Just for that night, just by the water, just where no one could see her. By morning, she had made a decision. She would not let this be the ending of her story. She left Silver Hollow 2 weeks later. Not dramatically. No speeches, no tears at the gate. She packed one bag. She had saved enough money from years of working as a healer's apprentice to start somewhere new. She went to Thornmere, a border city where wolves and humans and half-bloods moved alongside each other, and nobody paid much attention to anyone's pack origins. She found a small room above a tea shop. She introduced herself to the local herbalist, an old woman named Marin who asked no questions and had a great deal of knowledge to share. Serafina worked hard. She listened more than she spoke. She learned things that her years at Silver Hollow had never taught her: how to treat nerve pain with oil pressed from specific roots, how to speak to a patient so that they felt calm before the medicine even touched them, how to run a small business with honesty and care. Within a year, she had her own practice. It was a single room with clean shelves and good light, and a chair by the window where patients could sit while she prepared their remedies. People came from 3 neighborhoods away because they had heard she was careful and fair. She did not advertise. She did not need to. She did not date. She did not seek another bond. Her wolf was quieter now, not broken, but careful, like a bird that has learned to check the sky before it flies. What Serafina could not see, in her small apartment above the apothecary, was what was happening inside the palace of the Alpha King. Kael Draven had made what he believed was a rational decision. He was a king. Kings did not choose with their hearts, or so he had been taught, by advisors and tradition, and the cold logic of power. The mate bond had surprised him. He had not expected it. And when he felt it, his first instinct had not been joy. It had been something closer to fear, a fear that he had never examined closely enough to understand. So he did what people sometimes do with things they are afraid of. He made a decision, and called the fear a strategy. He married Isolde of the Blood Moon Court 6 months later. The wedding was large and celebrated, and perfectly arranged. His advisors were pleased. His alliances strengthened. Everything looked exactly right. But something was wrong. It started small. He stopped sleeping well. His wolf, which had always been a disciplined and powerful force inside him, grew restless. His senses, which should have been sharp, began to dull. He made decisions in meetings, and then could not remember making them. He would stand at the palace window at night and feel a pulling sensation in his chest. Not painful exactly, but persistent, like a compass needle that refuses to point where you are standing. His healers could find nothing wrong. His wolf was physically healthy. There was no illness, no injury, no explanation. And then his wolf stopped shifting fully. This was not a small thing. For an Alpha King, the ability to shift completely was not just physical. It was the foundation of his authority, his strength, his identity. A wolf who could not shift was like a river that had stopped running. Everything downstream was affected. His council kept it quiet, but Kael knew. He felt it every morning when he tried to call his wolf forward, and found only a dim, reluctant response, like calling someone's name in a large empty building and hearing the echo before you hear any answer. The visions came on the night of a lunar eclipse. He was asleep when it happened, and then he was not asleep, and he was standing in a field that had no color, everything white and gray and still, and a presence stood across from him that he understood, without being told, was not human and not wolf. She looked at him the way a teacher looks at a student who has answered incorrectly and is not yet aware of it. She did not say many words. She said only a few. But they landed in him like stones dropped into deep water, and the ripples did not stop. He woke with silver marks on his palms. They did not hurt. They did not fade. He spent 3 weeks in the palace library, reading texts that his advisors thought were purely ceremonial. He was not a man who believed in signs. He had spent his whole life building a kingdom on logic and structure. But the marks on his hands were not logical, and the wolf that could barely shift was not logical, and the pulling feeling in his chest at night was not logical, and eventually a man who has built his entire life on logic reaches a point where the evidence in front of him demands a different kind of thinking. He found what he was looking for in an old text, written in a language that required 2 translators and 4 days of work. It described what happened when an alpha willfully walked away from a moon goddess-chosen bond. It was not described as punishment. It was described as consequence, the natural withdrawal of something divine that had been refused. Kael sat with that word for a long time. Refused. He had not thought of it that way. He had thought of himself as making a choice. But a choice and a refusal are sometimes the same thing, and the difference is only in how honest you are willing to be about it. He found out where Seraphina was living. He came to Thornmere quietly, without guards, without announcement, wearing plain clothes that made him look like anyone. He stood outside her apothecary on a Tuesday morning and watched through the window for a while before he went in. She was speaking to an elderly patient with the kind of attention that cannot be performed, the kind that is simply what a person does because it is who they are. She laughed at something the old woman said, and the laugh was easy and real, and something in Kael's chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the mate bond, and everything to do with what he had chosen to walk away from. She saw him when she turned around. She did not flinch. She finished with her patient. She walked the woman to the door and closed it gently. Then she stood across the counter and waited. He told her everything. He did not try to make it sound better than it was. He told her about the wolf, the marks, the visions, the text in the library. He told her about the fear he had never named before. The fear that a mate bond with a low-ranking healer would make him look weak, would cost him the respect of people who measured strength in bloodlines and titles. He told her that he had known the bond was real, that he had felt it clearly, and that he had walked away from it anyway. She listened to all of it without speaking. Then she said something quiet and steady that he had not expected. She told him that she was not angry anymore, that she had done the work of healing, but that she was not the same person he had walked away from 3 years ago. She had built a life here, a real one, made of real things, earned with her own hands, and she would not give that up to fill a space he had emptied himself. He went back to the palace, but he could not stop thinking about what she had said. He wrote her a letter, one letter, carefully done, no pressure in it. He asked only if she would let him try, not as a king reclaiming something he had lost, but as a person asking for the chance to be known by someone he had not treated fairly. She did not reply for 11 days. When she did, she gave him one condition. She told him to come back to Thornmere with nothing, no title, no guards, no performance of power, and stay for 30 days as an ordinary person. If he could do that, she would see what there was to see. He arrived in 3 days. Those 30 days were not like anything he had experienced before. He worked in the apothecary. He was slow at it and slightly clumsy with the small tools, but he learned. He carried things for neighbors. He sat with Serafina in the evenings and talked, not strategically, not carefully, just talked, about small things, about what she had discovered about people in her years of healing them, about what he had lost when he stopped knowing how to rest. His wolf grew calmer every day, not because the Thornmere air was different, but because Chaol himself was different there. Stripped of everything that usually defined him, he found something underneath, quieter, more honest, less afraid. On the 20th day, she told him about the night by the river, the sound her wolf had made. She described it simply, without drama, as something she had carried for a long time and was now putting down. He sat with it in silence. He did not try to fix it or explain it away. He simply stayed with the weight of it. Then he told her what he wanted. He wanted to spend the rest of his life being the kind of person that sound never had reason to happen again. He said it plainly, the way a person speaks when they have finally stopped rehearsing. On the 28th day, the silver marks on his wrists faded. On the 30th night, under a full moon, his wolf shifted completely for the first time in years. Strong and free, the way it used to be before he had broken his own path. They sat by the river that night, 2 people under the same sky, not speaking much, not needing to. Serafina looked at the water and thought about her grandmother in the garden, grinding lavender, saying that the universe did not make mistakes. She had been angry at that idea for a long time. She had thought it was naive, but she understood it differently now. The universe had not made a mistake when it chose Chaol for her, and it had not made a mistake when it broke what he had built on a false foundation. It had simply waited for him to become someone worth what it had already decided to give him. She took her time. She made no rushed promises, but she let him stay. And that, more than any ceremony or declaration, was where the real story began.